When people talk about the birth of heavy metal, they generally talk about the great British bands like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple. But America also played a really important role in the origins of this music. And you can't talk about American metal without talking about Kiss.
You are number 6!
The story of American heavy metal would not be complete without the Alice Cooper Band. They're one of the most extreme live acts of all time, and they've also written some of heavy metal's most memorable radio anthems. So how did this outrageous underground band from Detroit get their start?
Every weekend at the Grandie or the East Town or these great rock dungeons, it was like, you know, the MC5, Iggy and Alice. Iggy was the king of the punks, and I was this other thing. I was this sort of, you know, Phantom of the Opera kind of character. We loved it. I mean, you know, we could go as far as we wanted to go on stage. And, I mean, it was always, who's crazier, Iggy or Alice?
What do you think enabled you guys to achieve that marriage between a harder sound and yet also be accessible on radio?
It was time, and we had a producer named Bob Ezrin who got it. He heard us at Max's Kansas City. He heard 18, and he went, oh. He says, what's that song, I'm Edgy? And I said, there's edgy. I said, you mean 18? And he goes, yeah. He says, that song is so dumb. Mm-hmm. It's a hit. We would play it, and he would go, no, dumb it down. The song is about a guy that's, I'm 18, I'm a boy, I'm a man, and I dig it.
I'm 18 and I like it.
Mike Bruce was writing great pop stuff that then the band would take and make into hard rock. And then Alice had these, you know, strange ideas and sensibilities that he would inject into the lyrics. The job that I had was to take all of those elements and to organize them in a way that brought a kind of spine to each of the songs.
Bob knew how to take our insanity and make it into a real palatable package. Songs like 18 and School's Out. Even if you hate Alice Cooper, you have to like those records because they're fun to listen to.
18, I gotta get away. I've gotta get out of this place. I go running without a second.
Did radio have a significant role in catapulting Alice?
The Alice Cooper group owe their career to radio. It was actually Rosalie Tremblay, who was at CKLW, the Big 8, in Windsor, Ontario, on the other side of the river from Detroit, who heard our sad little rendition of I'm 18.
She heard this record, and her son liked it. When she had a teenage son, her son said, that's the coolest record. So she added it. And the next thing you know, it got requests, and it was a major hit. Now, if you were a hit on CKLW, that means that was the biggest station in the Midwest. If you got a hit on CKLW, you had a national hit. Radio-wise, we were a bit of an oddity. The hardest rock thing on the radio at that time probably was the Guess Who. To crack the top 40, you were up against Motown, Burt Bacharach. In order to get in that top 40, you had to have a record that really made a dent, that made people go, what was that? You know, and that's what 18 did.
And then after that, we were looked at like a radio act.
Yeah.
It was kind of expected. It wasn't a matter of trying to get radio anymore. It was, radio was waiting for the next thing we were going to do.
With I'm 18 on the charts and School's Out hitting #1 in the UK, Alice Cooper was now a household name. But radio success was an anomaly for hard rock bands during the 1970s. For most bands, touring was the only way to reach audiences. And there's no better example of a successful touring act than Kiss.
get your perspective on how touring became so critical during the 70s.
In the early days, I remember playing certain places where I knew the people weren't huge fans when we walked in. People in the audience after, the first couple of songs, some of them would be sitting like this going, all right, prove it. Halfway through the show, the people were up. And then, by the time the drums levitated and everything blew up, they walked out of the club, fans.
We do the show, sell it out. They were cheering, smiling. We got a lot of girls that night, had a great party, and they go back and go, why ain't we on the radio? Next day we read the papers. It said we sucked. We were loud. We were boisterous. We were out of control. They don't understand us. This band should be killed or shot or hung. What's wrong here?
If you're not getting played on the radio, you have to play it to the people directly. This is before MTV. This is before YouTube. Touring was really the only way that they could get their music out to the people. So these guys are touring incessantly.
There was a cult thing to where a band would come to town, and you had 500 or 600 people that were saying, I want to see this band. But even Kiss, they didn't explode on their first record. They went out and worked and opened for people and busted their balls out on the road.
Here's a band who was only played on FM radio, got very little top 40 airplay, which is what most bands in those days had to get to explode. We had left Warner Brothers, who was our distributor, and we had none of our own money, and we couldn't afford to put them back in the studio. So what we did was do a live album, because we really had no other choice.
Rock and roll all night, party every day. You show us everything you've got. You keep on dancing and the room gets hot. You drive us wild, you drive me crazy.
Why do a live record?
Desperation. We were like at the end of our rope. We were so frustrated that we could not get our sound on vinyl. We hear a lot of other English bands. You hear from Zeppelin, The Who, all these other bands. A few bands by then did do live albums, and they sounded phenomenal. Why can't we do this? And finally, Eddie Kramer came into the picture, and we went out on the road with Eddie with a bunch of trucks, and we recorded every night live. When we went and listened every night in the trailer, that it was so exciting because what we were missing was the audience, the screaming, the kids involved in the energy of the music. And we thought, now this is what kids will bring home to their living room and get partied out and get crazed and stoned and put it on and party all night long.
Never thought it would explode the way it exploded. Nobody did. The live album gave this energy that no studio album could capture with this band. It was for fans who saw them and wanted to relive it, and it was for fans who didn't see them and got off on what was going on, the excitement.
It was the right record at the right time, and it gave the band a shot in the arm, because prior to that, the first 3 albums did okay. We weren't a million-selling album group. If Alive would have failed, I don't know what would have happened. But history is history.
Alive was Kiss's first album to reach the top 10 and is still the band's longest charting record of all time. So now that Kiss and Alice Cooper were selling millions of records, what did it take to bring the rest of the American hard rock genre into mainstream culture?
If I hear you calling, but I can't come home right now. Me and the boys are playing, and we just can't find the sound.
Tell me the story of how you came to work on Destroyer and specifically Beth.
The first thing that happened was that I saw them play live in, I believe it was Saginaw, Michigan, in a 9,000-seater. And what was remarkable about it was that from the moment they started playing, people were up on their feet, and they never sat down. They just stayed on their feet through the whole concert and yelled and screamed and pumped their arms in the air, and then they left, and they were very happy. But the whole crowd was made up of 15-year-old boys. So then I met them, and I said, we got to expand your horizons here and your fan base. What we have to do is to make you more attractive, a little more romantic. So in looking through Peter's material, he had this thing called Beck.
And I said, I got a great song, man. And I know we don't do ballads. God forbid the band don't do, because the band, that was the rules. We'll never, ever do a ballad as long as we live. And so I spruced it up, and I upped the beat, and I sang it to Gene. He goes, no, it's not so bad. And finally, when Ezra got to rehearsals, I sang it for Bobby, and he said, no, I hear it much slower. And I think we should call it Beth.
It was almost like a country song. It was sort of folky, It had a kind of little bounce to Beck, I hear you calling. So I said to Peter, do you mind if I take this home and play around with it a little bit? And he said, no, go ahead. Once I hit that little riff in the piano, I suddenly heard a lush, orchestral approach to this thing, and I heard a lush ballad. And then the job was to go back and sell Kiss, the cock and balls masters of the universe, on the idea of doing a song with a piano and an orchestra.
Gene and Paul, they hated it. So the day even when I had to go in to sing it, the two of them was sitting there in the console as I was out of the room. And they're doing this, and they're doing this to me. So Ezra threw them out. And sure enough, by throwing them out, we got it on maybe the 5th take, and it came out beautiful.
Just a few more hours, and I'll be right home to you.
The album went out, and they wound up putting it on the B-side of Detroit Rock City. And sure enough, a DJ in Georgia flipped it over one day for the hell of it. He put it on, and then the phone started ringing, and it was like, play that song again. Once Beth got on, everything got on. Everything went gold, everything started being played.
Beth was a big shot in the arm for us. It gave us exposure to people that normally wouldn't even know who Kiss was. That album sold twice as many copies because of that one song. We all got houses and cars out of it, too. That didn't hurt.
'Cause me and the boys will be playing all night.
Disco. Disco killed so much in its wake.
I was made for loving you, baby.
I know. But yeah, I have no excuse for that.
I was made for loving you, baby. You were made for loving me. And I can't get enough of you, baby. Can you get enough of me?
Disco song. They bitched about a ballad. We're doing disco now. It was like, to me, Black Sabbath doing a disco song. I could not see Ozzy singing a disco song.
There were a lot of bands who weren't disco doing disco songs. Kiss saw what was happening with Donna Summer and the Village People and Cher, and they saw the sales and how huge this was becoming. Knowing Gene and Ace and everybody, they probably said, well, if we could sell more records and make more money, we'll give it a shot.
I Was Made for Loving You was a huge departure, and it was something I wasn't really happy about either, because it was started to get into the disco vein, but somehow it happened, and it was a big hit. What do you want to be remembered for is the big question.
Kiss doing disco put the nail in the coffin for American heavy metal, and by the late 70s, Cream magazine had declared it officially dead. But it was California newcomers Van Halen that helped reinvigorate metal in America. So what exactly was new about the sound of Van Halen?
When I first heard Van Halen, it was just like, wow. The overall vibe of Van Halen was very energetic and very, very new sounding, very fresh sounding. And it had a ton of attitude. It was just in your face.
It was time to give up on Styx. It was time to give up on Foghat. Even though those guys might have been 20 or 25, they looked like they're 40 with those mustaches. When the first Van Halen album came out, it just blew me away. We'd never heard anything like that put together in that kind of way with the hooks and the hard edge.
When we came on the scene, we didn't want to be pigeonholed into one kind of genre, so we would always tell everybody, no, we're big rock. Because it was just something that was different, Van Halen plays big rock.
We got everything. We got enough food and booze for about 500-700 people here this evening, Originally, what we were going to do is we were going to turn all the equipment around backwards and show our behind to the audience, and that way everybody'd be backstage.
And Van Halen recapture what I think hard rock lost in the 70s, and that's sort of a Dionysian celebration, particularly with the rise of more distinct heavy metal. They lost that feeling of celebration, and Van Halen are all about that.
They came on crazy, drinking frickin' straight out of the bottle and doing drugs and got the chicks. They just opened it up for Poison, opened up for Motley Crue. Van Halen were the next generation, in my opinion, of reinventing metal.
By the mid-70s, bands like Deep Purple and Black Sabbath were no longer on the vanguard of heavy music in England, creating a void for something new. And then a whole new sound emerged for the next generation of rock fans. That sound was glam rock.
The music that was coming out of the late 60s, which we were all very into, had no identifiable look. When you think back, not many of these bands had big visual image. There was a lot of bands, haircuts, curtains, nose, that's all you saw. So I think kind of dressing up the late 60s commercial rock was where bands like Sweet came in.
Glamrock was very big in Britain at that time. So you'd find bands like The Sweet had quite a heavy rock style. You know, it was all revolving around guitars, bass and drums. But at the same time, they were adopting the kind of gay camp rock appearance of Mark Bolan and David Bowie. And they were all getting hit records, much to the annoyance of Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple.
Why do you think fans were moving away from that serious, we're going to change the world mentality towards more just, we just want to go to a show and have a good time?
England was having harder times during the glam rock period. Protest marches, people were striking a lot. But usually when all that kind of stuff starts happening, the pubs fill up and people generally want to have a good time that gets you away from all the things that are going on in your life. We were probably lucky to be the outlet for their frustration.
The glam rock thing was a big fashion thing. And a younger generation of kids who weren't so concerned about Vietnam War or death, doom and destruction. You know, what they were really concerned about was buying the next great hit record by David Bowie or T-Rex. You know, it was a party time, really. It's party music.